Actions speak louder than words, and we're so thankful that you've joined us for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Executive Summit. By you being here today, you've told us that you want to make irreversible and sustainable change. And we're going to do something amazing today. We're taking a 2-day conference and we're going to get this done in 2 hours, but we're going to need your help. This is going to be like a roller coaster moving fast. So we've asked speakers that can speak for 90 minutes on a topic to speak for 5 minutes. Why would we do that? Well, we have over 600 executives registered for this event. We want to hear from you. We want to get your insight. So after a round of speeches, you'll have the opportunity to give your insights and react to what's being said. And we're having a real conversation. So I would like to get this thing started. I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, the CEO of Thoughtexchange, Dave MacLeod.
Thank you, Kelvin. I can see people streaming in right now. I'm very thankful and grateful that you're here. First of all, I want to acknowledge something. And I'm going to do it like this. I know that 3 of the Fortune 500 CEOs identify as Black. And I know that there's been several studies in several different years that there are more CEOs named Dave than there are female CEOs in the Fortune 500. I am a white CEO and my name is Dave. And on top of that, I'm 6'1", which happens to be the average height when you aggregate across CEOs in the Fortune 500. I'm the opposite of a minority. I want to check my privilege in this conversation. I want to make sure that I'm showing up as someone who is an ally and believes deeply in this cause. And I'm so grateful for Kelvin and the group of people that we've gathered here together so we can have this conversation. Later, I'm going to get a chance to talk to Carolyn about privilege and about my belief and about how I'm learning and the mistakes I'm making. I look forward to that, because I think that's an important journey for people to really get aligned with as we go through the conversation of irreversible and sustainable change as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so the next thing I'm gonna do is, rather than talk, I'm gonna shut up and I'm gonna actually ask people here, you all showed up for this event. And I mean, I know why Forrest showed up. I know why Calvin showed up. I know why the speakers show up. They have a career of showing up and speaking on these topics. I want to know why you showed up. And so I thought we could actually start with a conversation and try to differentiate this right off the bat and make sure that we're giving people the right to their voice. And you've just entered in the door, and the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is take a second, pull out your phone. And the first activity, and I hope you'll remember it, is that I'm asking you this question. Why are you here? And why is that important? So if you pull out your phone and you take the camera mode, and then that link comes down, you just touch that link. Don't take a picture. And that's the best way to participate. We're going to do this 5 times today. There's going to be 5 chances to actually hear from the whole group about what actions were taken away. What are the sort of things we're learning from today? So we should actually have thousands and thousands of thoughts if we succeed in this. So the best way you can do it is use your phone. This is not a quick poll. This is a chance to share your voice and for us to learn what comes to the top. The next piece, though, is that there's a link in the chat that if you don't want to use your phone, you can go ahead and click that link. Then you just have to navigate going back and forth to the webinar and participating that way. Either way will work just fine. But I want to show you that we already have 100 people here and we're already having a conversation with all 100 people because people have a right to their voice. And if there's something I believe, that's it.
Wow, look at that. Look at all the activity there. Over 1,700 ratings already. We're getting data immediately. Let's look at some of the top thoughts. So the ratings, your ratings are saying what the top thoughts are. First one up there says, I need to learn how to show up better as a diverse, inclusive human. All right. Deepen my understanding of diversity and inclusion. That's a good reason to be here. How to learn and share how to help make this world a better place. We got some good positive people on this thing here, huh? Let's see. Oh, what's that one there? I'm sad and angry and done with waiting on change. Wow, That's powerful, because it's 2020 and we shouldn't need this summit. Huh? There you go. Amen to that, let me tell you. So we're starting to see the power of this thing. We're getting your insights, and your insights are so important. And we're going to be able to share this back with you. So that's one of the takeaways that I promise you're going to get out of this event, is all the insights that we get, we're sharing them right back to you immediately in real time. So in order to get us going, well, we know that if you want to have an organization that is working like a well-oiled machine, it has to be a diverse organization, but you have to build the foundation. So what we're going to do is we're going to have 3 speakers that are experts in their field that are going to share some amazing insights with us, and then we're going to get a chance to react. So in this foundation category, we're going to have Forrest Harper, the president and CEO at INROADS. We're going to have Kenneth Bouyer, America's Director of Inclusiveness and Recruiting at EY, and Lorna Lewis, Superintendent at Malvern Union Free School District. So to get us going, we're going to start with Forrest Harper, President and CEO of INROADS. It's an organization with over 40,000 alumni. I'm one of those alumni. And they've been helping place talented minority youth in corporate America and priming them for leadership for the last 50 years. Forrest Harper.
Thank you very much, Kelvin. We're very proud of you. And I'm sure if you took a poll right this minute, there'd be at least 40 or 50 people on the call today that have either been touched by INROADS or INROADS alum, or executives who are on the call, like our board member, Carolynn Johnson, who have touched INROADS, like Kim Bouyer and others, who really have helped these students along the journey. And so I want to say thank you, first of all, for them. Imagine this, in 2015, the tech industry got caught with their hands in the cookie jar. That cookie jar had nothing to do with anything illegal. It just had to do with transparency. They voluntarily told the story of their diversity makeup in tech. And by the time the lights were turned on in the kitchen and they pulled their hands out of the cookie jar, the tech industry basically had less than 2% representation of Black and brown and diversity in the tech industry. They went to work right away. They not only went to work, they made commitments, and they actually pledged over $532 million to correct this situation. It's now been 5 years. To date, they've made some progress. That number now is nearly 3.8% of representation of tech in terms of diversity and inclusion. They admit they got more work to do, but there's also more opportunity. The day after the unfortunate death of Mr. Floyd in Minneapolis, Breonna and others, corporate America went to work. Corporate America said, we're not only going to pledge to denounce racism, we're also going to pledge our pockets. So as of this morning, corporate America, since that day, has pledged over $7.6 billion to impact social injustice in America. With that in mind, diversity and inclusion is one of the things they committed to. And my partners on this phone, on the call today, are part of that pledge. Well, what happens next is what's going to be the interesting story. And so what we're saying is that we're seeing a lot of good work, but we're also seeing delayed work. And in one of those examples with INROADS, and what we do is we're part of all of the solutions to building the pipeline in a diverse way, so that the next time that Dave presents 5 years from now about the CEOs in America, instead of having just 3, perhaps we could have 30 Black CEOs in America, or 30 Hispanic CEOs, or 30 Native American CEOs and CEOs. Well, we're building it from the pipeline, but we've got work to do. And that work to do starts with today, according to NACE, the National Association of Colleges and Employers. literally the 200 companies reported out in 2019 that 6% of 42,000 paid internships in America are African American, just 6%. Just 4% are Hispanic. We've got work to do. And that work comes with working together and realizing that we've got to do some unconventional work, some uncomfortable work to get it done. So that's why we're partnering with the reality of, let's tell the truth about what we're all doing with the pipeline to ensure that they're there, and then retention. And the last part of this is that the retention part is the next body of work. Because if $7 billion is spent just on increasing the representation, guess what? We're gonna have some brilliant, bright, black and brown talent coming into corporate America, just busting the doors down. But if we can't keep them, there's gonna be a challenge. And so I wanna make sure that we are here all together to work through, to be able to do things in such a way that all are invited to the table, to include the disabled. And thank you, my friend, for reminding me in the chat room about the disabled. All inclusive talent to come to the table. So to that end, we've got work to do. Let's work together. The McKinsey report is already reported. We need a community of action, not just report out. So let's take the 7 billion and put into action by working together. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Kel, for the opportunity to address that. And we stand here with you to be able to work together.
Thank you so much, Forrest, for setting the tone for this amazing event. And we're gonna go right in. This is gonna be rapid fire. So we're gonna go right into Ken Bouyer, America's Director of Inclusiveness Recruiting at EY. He's been at EY for over 30 years. When I first got my INROADS internship at EY, and I was 19 years old and pretty arrogant, but Ken Bouyer taught me a few things and put me in shape. So I'm so happy to have you here. Ken Bouyer.
Kelvin, thank you so much, buddy. And hey, you know, part of this is taking responsibility for the young folks that are coming up, and you got to tell them what they need to hear, not necessarily what they want to hear. So I had to tell you what you needed to hear, man. You need to shape up. So, but so proud of you and for what you've done and what you're doing. Forrest, always a pleasure to follow you and to be in your company, and so many friends, frankly, that are going to be speaking today. And it's just great to be with you. And Kelvin, you're right, man. I'm just celebrating my 30th year with the firm, and which for me is just an incredible feat. Grew up in New York City, in Queens specifically. I'm actually a recovering auditor, so I'm an accountant by background, but leading our DE&I efforts on the talent side and recruiting now, and been doing that for a number of years. And for me, it's a personal thing, because when I started with the firm back in the day, you know, there were not a lot of Black accountants. You know, now we have organizations, have had organizations like the National Association of Black Accountants. A little shout out to them, as well as shout out to INROADS. But we didn't have a lot of folks that looked like me in their profession. And so for me to be in a position to try to affect change, to try to introduce, you know, Black and brown folks and others to the greatness of this professional services world, it's an honor. So that's why I do this work. And I've got a 15-year-old daughter who, you know, I want to make sure that she has an opportunity to do whatever she wants to do, obviously, but is exposed and given equal opportunity, if you will. So great to be here. I'm going to talk a little bit about building pipeline. And I so appreciated the comments by the folks who are participating to want to create change. I'll give you a couple things to consider and think about as you're looking to build a diverse talent pipeline. The first question I have for you is your organization really committed to diversity? And that's a serious question, because I think for us, as you mentioned, we need action. What I have found, and I'm gonna keep it 100 because that's what I do, post George Floyd, there's a lot of organizations that all of a sudden got woke and people, but they're not about the action. And so the question is your organization really committed to this thing called diversity and inclusion? And so do you have a person, a strategy, an investment? Is your board, is your CEO, are you as an executive or a leader engaged in this opportunity to create the change that I saw many of you respond to? You want to be a part of the change. So my question is, what are you going to do about it? So who in your organization is responsible for ensuring you have a diverse pipeline and recruiting people who come from all different walks of life? So here at the firm at EY, we hire like 14,000 people a year, campus and experienced people. And what I do in my team and recruiters, we ensure there's a diverse talent pool, right? We're in the marketplace all the time, trying to make sure that people who are very different understand opportunities that are available. What's your communication strategy? Do you have a plan? Do you have people responsible? And how are you communicating opportunities that are in your industry, your world, if you will? And also, what is your area of focus? Diversity means a lot of things. That definition has really expanded over the years, right? So whether you're a veteran or you're differently able, whether you're part of the LGBT community, whatever it might be, how does your organization define diversity? And then what are you going to do differently to create that change that you want? What I hear a lot, I work a lot with our clients who are interested in creating a DE&I strategy, if you will. And many will say, I can't find the talent. I can't find people of color. And to that, I say that's bull. Where are you looking? How are you showing up? Are you using organizations like INROADS? Are you looking at different sourcing channels other than your traditional ones that you typically go to, right? What's that definition of crazy? Keep doing the same thing, look for different results. You gotta do some different things. You gotta fish in different ponds if you wanna see a different talent result. So ask yourself those questions. The other piece that is really needed in this space is you have to also understand where's your business units. So however your organization is structured, whether you're a partnership, you've got business units, your business units need to be engaged in this discussion as well, because candidly, the recruiting organization in your group, your company, can only do a piece of it. They could bring the talent to the organization, but the question is, the folks who are conducting the interviews, making decisions. So if your business units, your leaders, your executives are not on board with what you're trying to do to create change, recruiters can bring all the diverse talent in the world to you. But if you're not hiring them, if people don't appreciate and respect why you're trying to diversify your organization, your results will be reflected therein. So how are you engaging your business? And how are they part of this solution as well? Because it can't just be recruiting engaged and trying to bring diversity to your organization. So there's a lot to unpack and a lot to consider there. And then finally, what I get a chance to do, and I'm encourage many of you, I sit on a number of university boards. I'm involved in a lot of universities that the firm recruits at. And what I do is I go to those campuses, I talk to the university presidents, the deans, the provosts, and I question them on why don't you have more diversity in your business school or your engineering school? Let's talk about what this university is doing to increase the diversity on campus. Because ultimately, that's the pool that we're each, if you're looking for university grads, that each of us will recruit from. So we've got to start at the sources, university levels. As a firm, we're doing a lot at the high school level as well. So we've got to plant trees because we all need to breathe. And if you want diversity, you got to make sure you're planting trees all over the world. So, Kelvin, I'll stop there. I mean, to your point, I can speak for 90 minutes on this. I'm not too passionate about it, am I? But I'm going to turn it back over to you. Thanks for the time. Look forward to the dialogue.
Ken, thank you so much for keeping it 100. And that's why we have you here. We know you got the wealth of knowledge. And education is the foundation. So we're going to transition right into Lorna Lewis, superintendent at Malvern Union Free School District. Lorna, you have the floor.
Hello, everyone. And I see that I'm like a fish out of water here because I don't see anybody in K-12 being represented. So I think I have to represent all of my public school folks. So I'm looking at a lot of people of color out there, and I'm going to ask the first question. When was the first time that you were educated by somebody of color? And I probably just think back of the first time you looked up and saw a teacher of color in front of you. And I know that many of you are probably going to say, I never had one, because that's the statistic in New York. And I know that it's a statistic all over the United States. Yet in 2014, our public schools became minority, as they say, minority. So we have more children of color in our public schools than we've ever had, and will continue to have even more students of color. And yet, if we look at our staff has remained pretty much the same. In fact, when we look in New York, and I have most of my statistics will come from New York, but I would encourage you to look all over the country, you'll see the same thing. Many children go through our K through 12 system, and I would imagine also in the college world, never having been exposed to a teacher of their race or ethnicity. And you may say, well, why is that important? Because the research shows that a Black boy in the grade 3, having had a teacher of color, changes his trajectory throughout his entire life. So we have to realize that having teachers of color, that makes a difference for all children, not just children of color, but all children of color. And when you look at the statistics all over, New York State has 732 districts. There are 39 superintendents of color, and losing them as we speak, because these districts tend to recruit saying that they want diverse candidates and they don't hold on to them. But think about that. What our children of color see are cooks and custodians and people in roles that are, I'm not putting that down at all, but I'm just saying that they need to see role models that are superintendents, that are teachers, that are doctors and lawyers. And that's really very, very important. The thing is that we have to be serious about our recruiting strategies. And I love what Mr. Bouyer said, is that you can't be looking in the same places. So we have to change how we recruit, and not only change how we recruit, but have policies within our school systems that will support those candidates that you bring in. So for example, COVID has provided us with some opportunities, because now you can't just screen out resumes, the paper resumes. Now we have to move towards having videos so people can see. If they say they're really serious about having somebody of color, then the videos will show that they have people of color. We have to look at our HBCUs, we have to look at our sororities and our fraternities and use those connections to increase our diversity pool. So if they're not in the pool in the very beginning, they're not going to be there in the end. The other thing that we've actually addressed is we can't just bring people in. For example, you go out and you recruit a Latinx teacher, and then when a parent comes into our schools, you pull them out of the class to help translate. Those children are losing that teacher for that time. So we have to be sure that we don't have these microaggressions where we say to a Black teacher, a Black male teacher, who's, when we're having a child with disciplinary issues, would you handle that child for us? We have to be serious about recruiting and making sure that our teachers who are diverse are qualified candidates, and in fact have some ways that we can move them towards qualifications. The other thing that distresses me in terms of diversity is we're in a COVID-19 environment. And I find that my rich districts have devices, have broadband access, and we need to move as a nation, and we need to move. I work with the NAACP on this. We need to call on our leaders to make sure that broadband access and access to devices and access to content quality instruction is equitable across our nation. Because this year, as of March, we were shut down, and our children will probably not get instruction until March of next year. What are we going to do about the whole year of instruction that is lost if we are not paying attention to those issues? If we're not training our teachers how to work in an online environment, how to access, families that are poor, the social distancing means going to eat a corner of one room. And, how do we deal with children who are in the homeless environment? And third, the last thing is, earlier this year, my children saw for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, a Black man dying with a knee on the neck, and Their question is, does my life matter? And how do we change our environment in our schools so that our children know that their lives matter? For 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and we just found out yesterday that Breonna Taylor's life did not matter. How are we changing instruction? How are we changing the world so that our children and my children who are growing up in my schools get a different message that their lives matter? Until we do that, all of this talk about diversity means nothing, absolutely nothing, until we address that. Thank you.
Lorna, that's powerful. Education is the foundation. And I want to thank the audience. There's hundreds of you, and you've listened to us for the last 15, 20 minutes. Now it's your turn. Dave, let's do our first exchange where the audience gets to give their insight and the real power comes out of this.
Let's do this. So please, if you just joined us, and many of you have, pull out your phone, and we want to know what thoughts and actions come to mind after hearing our first three presenters. And I just want to add my, I'm full goosebumps listening to each and every one of you speak. I feel really inspired and troubled at the same time in equal measure. And I hope that all of you participate and share some thoughts and share some actions that come top of mind, and we'll share it back with everybody. We got 3 minutes to do it before we go into the next section. It's important that everyone's voice, and I do appreciate that there's a lot of great conversation happening in the chat. And I also want to acknowledge that not everyone feels the ability to actually have their name associated maybe with some ways that they're thinking, and also that this is a safe environment. Your name will not be associated with your thoughts in these exchanges, nor will it be associated with how you rate. So you can feel free to say what you like and rate how you like, and let's learn what matters. And I also want to thank everyone who's participating with their name associated, sharing links, sharing their LinkedIn is a different form of communication while panelists are speaking. So again, I'm going to get out of the way and just hear. I really appreciate you all sharing your thoughts. And let's see what thoughts and actions come to mind after that first fantastic kickoff.
And just a reminder, click the camera on your phone and hold it to that little box to the corner, and it'll take you right to the opportunity where you could put your insights in.
All right, same thing. We could do this for half an hour. Hearing from people's voices is not a 2-minute exercise. It's a way of being. However, we're going to move on because we got more people who need to talk and more time. So Kelvin, I'm going to pass to you to maybe comment on a couple of these thoughts and then bring us into, I saw a thought about how do you transition this into action, the foundations of action, which is where we're heading, but go ahead, let's look at some of these top thoughts. Let's go from there.
All right, I see right at the top, I see, well, 4.3 rating. People need to see individuals like them to succeed. And why it's important, making it home that we all need opportunity. Second thought, be cognizant of the demographic of your staff. All right, I see that one. How will we really create change? Systematic racism is embedded in so many levels. We have to do something now. So I see the passion in that there. So there's over 221 thoughts here. So we're gonna keep moving. Again, we're gonna make sure all of these insights are delivered to your organizations. We're gonna just email it right to you. So don't worry about that. We have over 221 thoughts there, but we gotta move into action, right? That's what we wanted to talk about. So the next group of speakers, they're gonna talk about sustainability. Where are we here? Yep. We're gonna talk about sustainability, and we have Renu Dalessandro, Chief Marketing Officer at Jovia Financial Credit Union, Ronald Taylor, Head of Diversity and Inclusion at Mizuho Bank, as well as we have Kamari, the Chief Learning Officer at Rock Central. So we're gonna hand it over to Renu. She's the Chief Marketing Officer at Jovia Financial Credit Union. She's the CMO there, and her CEO tapped her on the shoulder and told her, hey, fix this. So what do organizations do when right at the beginning, their CEO is on board? Now what?
Thank you so much, Kelvin, and welcome everyone. And thank you so much for providing us with this platform, not only to share our own experiences, but really gain such wonderful insights from so many seasoned experts as we just heard. So yes, as Kelvin mentioned, I'm CMO Jovia Financial Credit Union. We are in Long Island, New York, been there for 80 plus years. We have approximately 500 employees. So we have a diverse employee base who've been recently tasked, as Kelvin mentioned, with forming a DE&I plan. So we are really at the very beginning stages of laying the foundation on which we need to start building some of our initial framework. But the question that we keep asking ourselves is where do we start, right? What help do we need as leaders to start helping employees understand DE&I? I think someone had mentioned it before. If you ask the question, it's different things to different people. So you're rarely going to get the same answer. And it encompasses so many different facets. So in doing some initial work, we found a few things worth considering, right? When you're right at the very beginning. First things first, identify your business needs. They have to be aligned with the company objectives, and be sure that you build that strong connection to how the organization achieves its business goals. Otherwise, the initiative is just not going to succeed, right? Ask, who are we? What do we want to achieve? Who do we want to become? And get everyone to believe, truly believe in that mission, right? Identify the right stakeholders within the company. Know who your sponsors are. Know who your objectors are, right? Identify and really prepare for those who are not excited about this, because not everyone is going to be right off the bat. Find your allies who will become your biggest advocates, because ultimately they're the ones who are going to push the message for you, right? And push that organizational message forward. Another thing also is just understand the organization. I know we talk a lot about it, but really know your audience and get really good at listening. Understand what the appetite is, what the temperament is around you. Easy way to do that, and we're just at the beginning stages of starting to do this, is conduct focus groups, right? Listen, listen, listen. I can't stress that enough. Send out surveys to employees. Get help from a third-party expert in that space if you have to. Someone who could form the right questions, right? Another thing is just keep it simple. The DE&I initiative, it must be communicated clearly and easily. It must be understood by all, and also something that you can execute easily, right? It doesn't have to be this a massive in scope, and it can be done in in a reasonable budget. Perfect example is start with a series of small programs, right? Such as online training courses, lunch and learns, bring in a speaker on diversity inclusion topics, right? Post informative videos and articles on your company intranet, just to get the employees familiar with the subject matter, because this is something new and not everyone is going to get it. Right? Form committees. I know we've been doing a lot of that internally, just forming subcommittees for whatever it may be. It may be for social events. It may be for a certain project you want to get off the ground. Ask for volunteers. That in itself truly shows inclusiveness, right? Get everyone that you possibly can a seat at the table so that their voice is heard. I think also what's really important is build in accountability. Ask those managers to provide you with some sort of quarterly reports. Make sure they're talking about this at their staff meetings. Make sure that they are able and ready to promote diversity and inclusion within their own teams. Weave it into the daily actions, right? If you feel, or if there is some sort of pushback or results that are not positive as you first expect, pivot and change your course a little bit. Maybe focus on inclusion first and then diversity, especially for those, those companies that are new to this, right? Diversity training, again, it's not always as popular and effective. It has to be done right. And we're learning this as we go. So there is a certain level of expertise and a mindset needed really to work in the DE&I space. I've learned that even doing some of the research we've done already. Invest in the training, focus on learning about diversity best practices, understand your organization, establish partnerships with outside organizations, right? Because they could certainly help you. There's so much out there that you can learn, and integrate diversity into your workspace planning. Again, we at Jovia, we're really at the beginning stages, as I mentioned, but we're doing our homework to understand what these first important steps will be. And mistakes are going to happen, and that's okay, right? You learn from that. So just to sum it up, really, understand your organization well, get buy-in, start building those advocates, and listen. That's really the first place and the best place you can start. So thank you.
So much. Thank you so much, Renu. You got to start somewhere. It's much easier to steer a car if it's moving. All right. So we're going to go from an organization that's just getting started to 20 years of experience from Ronald Taylor, the head of diversity and inclusion at Mizuho. Basically, he took his 20 years of experience and he's starting there as their head of diversity and inclusion. They basically told him, hey, fix this thing. So Ryan, what do you got for us?
Well, first, I'll give you the name. It's Mizuho, Mizuho. And you know, thank you, Kelvin, Dave, thank you guys for putting this on. I'm going to be, you know, Ken always brings it. Ken always 200%. I say, don't put me any place near where Ken is speaking, because when Ken's speaking, I feel like, you know, I need to take notes and really kind of like learn from Ken. But I'm going to start, Kelvin, with my disclaimer before I talk about best practices for new CDOs. Any remarks I make today are going to be my own, do not necessarily represent Mizuho Americas or Mizuho Financial Group. And, you know, I think today of all days, I need to make sure that I make that disclaimer because I'm tired. I am exhausted. And I'm not, you know, the decision yesterday has just got me reeling. And I'm, you know, I appreciate that you guys are doing this and that you're putting this platform and that you're giving us this voice, but you know, coming off of things like what we just got yesterday has just got me reeling. So I've got some notes here. I might go through them, I might not. I could go completely off on a completely different tangent, but one thing that I know, you know, in terms of a couple of things. So Forrest, you mentioned $7.6 billion, you know, get some of that money and put some of that money to work in your organization. Think from best practices for a new CDO. If you had told me 20 years ago, I'd still be doing this. Like Ken, I'm a recovering CPA. But if you told me when I intentionally moved into this space 20 years ago that I would still be having these exact same conversations, I would have laughed at you. I thought this was going to be a quick run. We had some of the smartest people working on this stuff. We were going to get this fixed and we were going to move on to bigger and better things. Well, we're still here. And there's a reason we're still here. And I know one of the speakers talked on microaggressions and just unconscious bias and all the things that we get, you know, cerebral. We get it academically, but we haven't made any real input or movement in that space. We're not addressing the elephants in the room. You know, you have the CEO of Wells Fargo that says, well, there's no talent out there. We just can't find them. Elephant in the room right there. You're leaning into a bias that you need to pack up and throw away. But let me get back on point. Practices for new CDOs. I was just on LinkedIn. I was looking. There were 20 plus positions for chief diversity officers on LinkedIn. That's one of the things I was doing as we were kind of going into this. Some of those companies I've never heard of. Some of those companies, and you talk about have gotten woke. I don't know if they've gotten woke. I think they've gotten scared. I think they've gotten scared, and now all of a sudden this is something that they need. So if you're a new CDO, before you even go into a role, I would say just kick the tires. Make sure it's not performative. Make sure it's real, that these companies want this for the right reasons, not because they feel like they're falling behind or they're losing market share, whatever. Make sure it's the right reason, and you're going to do that by having seriously bold conversations with the folks that you're talking to. If it's performative, stay away from it, unless that's what you're into. If you want to take $500,000 to go and sit and be the guy who sits by the door, I was going to reference one of my favorite books from the 70s, The Spook Who Sat by the Door, but I'm not going to say that. Then go ahead. But you know what, stay away from me if that's your attitude. If you just want to take the money and make sure that, you know, people are comfortable and people are feeling good, do that, but stay away from me, because that's not what I'm in this for. If you want to join a company that's authentic, then go in and really challenge that leadership. challenge them with your questions. The interview is a two-way interview. So you're asking them, you know, you want to make sure you're going someplace where you're going to be successful with something that you're passionate about. Challenge the heck out of that leadership. And if they tell you they've got all the answers and, you know, we just need you to come in here and, you know, we'll call you when we need you, be careful. You know, but if they come in to Kelvin's point and they say, you know, we need help. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know how to fix this. We don't know what we're missing. We want you to come in with your levels of expertise or whatever it is, and we want you to help us do that. And then make sure that they're really at the table with you. This isn't, you know, I've been with Mizuho now for 2.5 months, and I came over because I did hear through a lot of those leadership conversations exactly what I needed to hear from that leadership. You know, a true commitment, a vulnerability, things that I really needed to hear to know, okay, we can work on this together. One correction I've made over the last 2 months has really been, a lot of folks are like, we're so glad you're here. We're so glad you're here. You're going to make this better. My pushback to all of them is, I'm so glad you're here because we're going to make this better. This isn't a one-person, one-stop shop where, again, Ron Taylor is going to come in and fix this organization or any organization. So I think, you know, it's important that everybody knows that they have skin in this game. Everybody knows they have skin in this game, and that everybody knows they have a right during these conversations around diversity and inclusion. So after 3 sleepless nights after watching 8 minutes and 46 seconds of, I'm still not sure of what I saw a murder. I penned something, and I've been sharing this and socializing this. So I want to share it now. And it's about rights. You know, George Floyd didn't get rights. He didn't get Miranda. He didn't get his rights in that situation. George Floyd was murdered on a media forum, and everybody got to see that. So I really started thinking about, well, what are the rights as they relate to this conversation in corporate around diversity and inclusion? You know, a lot of the old rules around talking about diversity and race and religion and politics, or you name it, I think got thrown out the window. And so the rights that I want to just share with you, you have the right not to remain silent. Anything you say, if you choose to exercise this right, know that anything you say can and will be used to change the course of history. You have the right to be angry. You have the right to be sad. You have the right to be frustrated, confused, and conflicted. You have the right to be an ally. And if you're not sure how to do that, let's figure it out together. And then just really remember that history has its eye on you. I opened every single one of my sessions going back to May with these rights, because I want everybody to know that they have that voice at this table. You know, and if you're angry, if you're frustrated, if you're claiming allyship, and that allyship comes across as performative versus authentic, you really need to go in a quiet time and ask yourself, why is this important to me? Back to the subject. So for new chief diversity officers, what else can you do besides making sure that you have leadership buy-in? What's always worked for me has been a sort of a top-down, bottom-up approach. You know, so really engaging that grassroots, whether you've got employee resource groups, you know, other groups. You know, I think somebody was talking about sort of just engaging with the businesses and making sure that you're in with the businesses, you know, follow the money, if you will, and just making sure that those groups are all working towards the same goal. I think as a chief diversity officer, we're kind of the glue that brings it all together. There's no part of our organization that's kind of immune to the work that we're doing. I have to get to know every single one of the 2,700 America's employees at Mizuho in order to do my job right. So I think that that's super important from a chief diversity officer perspective, is that you're touching every single aspect and every single point, part of the organization. And then I guess I'll stop with this. You know, there's some incredible momentum. So whether folks are doing this because they're scared or because they're woke, we've got incredible momentum right now, and we just need to leverage the heck out of that. You know, so if we got folks saying we need to do this, I'm not sure why we need to do it, but everybody else is doing it, take it and leverage it and write it and make it work. And let's just do that. So as chief diversity officers, it's not the time to be quiet and shy and timid and all of the above. It's really time to be bold and to push this thing forward. And I'll just steal this from John Lewis. It's time to get into some good trouble. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ron. That's powerful there. I wanted to clap right after that. Wow. So we're going to transition Kamari Yawa, the Chief Learning Officer at Rock Central, Rocket Mortgage, Quicken Loans. She is going to give us some real talk. So Kamari, it's all yours.
Thank you, Kelvin, and thank you for having me here. It is definitely a privilege and an honor. And I mean, Ronald just brought the real talk. And I hope, Ronald, that you are going to share those rights because I definitely want to take them back to my place of work and share with my colleagues and with our team members. So I hope, Kelvin, we're going to get that sent out. It's going to be somewhere posted rather soon. So we're talking about action. And for me, you know, I've been on this journey with our organization. I've been with the company 7 years. I've been on this journey for probably the past 5 with our organization. And, you know, prior to the murder of George Floyd, we have had a diversity and inclusion plan. And our Chief Diversity Officer, Trina Scott, has been extremely intentional. After George Floyd was murdered, as we all know, you know, watching someone die is not human. And I apologize, I'm a little choked up right now because I'm still reeling off of the events of yesterday. And I think that's important. When we started to double down on our work in May, I remember having a conversation with our Chief People Officer and our CEO at the time of this can't be performative. Like this has to be about sustainable and irreversible change. And our CEO sent out an op-ed and we had many conversations about what we were going to do differently. And so we devised the 6-point action plan. And we can get that out to everyone. But it's really under this mindset of going to what Renu said earlier about diversity, equity, and inclusion has to be a part of our DNA. And if we think that it's not, then we are foolish. And so when we created this action plan, we created it in partnership, not just with our executive leaders, but with also our team members. And one of the first things that we did was we said to all of our leaders, you need to go out and we need to have conversations with our team members. For far too long, these things happen in our world around us. And then our team members are expected to come into our workplace and act as though they did not happen. We can't allow that to happen anymore. And the first thing that we recognized is that we have amazing leaders in our organization, as many of you all who are watching today, who are brilliant. But when we talk about the topic of race, inhumanity, and the things that are happening around us, we have not been equipped to have those conversations. And going back to what Lewis said earlier today, how many of us have been exposed to those things? We have not. So we found really quickly, in order for us to do this right, we needed to start doing the inner work with our most senior leaders in the organization and really putting up a mirror, not to indict people, right? To understand that we all have these biases, unconscious or conscious. We all have biases. And if we're not going to face those things and the fact that these biases impact our decision-making, every single day, we are making decisions that impact marginalized people in our workspaces. And so we were very intentional. So after we said, go out and have these conversations, what we did was we held a town hall for all of our Black team members. And it was open for every Black team member to attend. We leveraged Thoughtexchange to help us engage with these team members. And we had our executive board attend. And it was with the sole intention that we hear about the experiences of our team members. Because to me, awareness is number one. I can't expect people to change if you're not aware. If you have been living in your world, in your whiteness, your entire life, how do I expect you to know of a different experience unless I expose you to that? So that was one of the first things that we did. And our team members came through loudly and they shared. And I remember hearing my CEO say, in his 40 plus years of life, he had learned more in that day than he had his entire life. Now, that's important because as leaders, we have to be vulnerable. If we are above reproach, if the people that we work with are above that, then how do you start to create change? And so for our head of our organizations to say he was learning and he was listening, and not only learning and listening, but taking action and understanding that not only does he have power, but he has privilege. And so now we're in a space in our organization where we're not just thinking about how do we impact what's happening inside of our organization, but we're also talking about how do we impact our communities. So we engage with our police departments. We engage with our governmental entities, because that's important. The reality of it is you can make a lot of changes in your organization, but if you're not also thinking about your communities, guess where your team members are going back to? Those very same communities. And so for us, it has really been about, one of the things that I often say is that as my job in developing people in this organization at every single level is to honor you with the truth. If I'm not honoring you with the truth, then what are you paying me for? And so I think in our positions, we have to be courageous to have the conversations that nobody else wants to have. But at the same time, we have to give people grace. We have to understand where people are coming from, take their perspectives, and then lean in and walk on this walk together. And I'll end with this. It's important to build relationships. If you don't take the time to build relationships to truly understand people and allow people to understand you, it is very difficult for you to move forward. So I'll give an example. I've been working with our CEO for the past several years. And it has been an amazing experience because part of my job is leadership development. And I remember soon after these things happened, I was on a call with him, a virtual call, and I was just not there. Like I was just emotionally, I was just over it. And he texted me and he said, what's going on? You seem a little off. Do you want to talk about it? And I was really at a place where I was like, I don't. And that's my CEO. I'm like, I don't. I have no words. And I wrote an article on Medium and I shared with him. And it was called To Whom It May Concern, A Message to America. And it was really just about like, I'm tired. I didn't create this problem. I was born into this problem. And now as a Black woman, there's so many expectations for me to fix the problem. And I can't. So I sent that article to him and he read it. He messaged me back and he said to me, I will never know what it's like to be a Black woman. But what I can tell you is that I am committed to creating change in the world around me. So however we can partner together to do that, I'm in for it. And let me tell you something, that meant so much to me because what it said to me is that with my leaders that I work with every day, we're in it together. The only way that we are going to be able to see irreversible, sustainable change is if we are all moving together to do it. If it's just the folks that look like me, right, or the marginalized people trying to do it, change isn't going to happen. And we're just talking BS. Excuse my language. So it's time for us to lean in, to really talk about action, but not just talk. Like, let's walk the walk and let's do it. Because I truly believe there are a lot of organizations out here who are just like, I don't know what to do. Help me. And when you have that, I think it is incumbent upon us to help right the ship. Thank you. Back to you, Kelvin.
Thank you so much, Kamari. This is amazing. We got some real tips from the last three speakers on what actions you can start taking, but let's hear from you, the audience. We have hundreds of you out there. What actions do you think corporations need to take? Here's your opportunity to be a part of this conversation. What are your thoughts? I saw in the comments there's quite a bit of chief diversity officers listening into this. What do you have to say? What are you doing? So let's take a look at some of the top thoughts so far. We have over 1,400 ratings so far. Strong need for allyship from all. We need to be open and candid with executive leadership to influence the change, because it's not the CDO. Be intentional, create awareness, have bold conversations, listen and learn, and take action. Wow. Well, we have hundreds of thoughts here, and we're going to be emailing all this data to you so you can use in your organization. So our next part of our discussion today is about sustainability. You see, there's a lot of media attention now, but media attention comes and goes. So how are we going to make sure that this change that we're trying to make here is sustainable? So we're going to have Calvin Harris, the Senior Vice President and CFO at the National Urban League. We'll have Dennis Carpenter, the CEO of Aspirational Insights Consulting, and Deborah Langford, the Executive Director of Business Development of Advancing Black Pathways at JPMorgan Chase. So we're going to get right into it with Calvin Harris Jr., the Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Officer at the National Urban League, the nation's oldest and largest community-based movement devoted to empowering African Americans.
Thank you, Kelvin. It's a pleasure to be here with this group. I had these remarks all set aside, but admittedly, when you hear the conversation, a few things come to mind. For me, I guess this is what, 6 months of a quarantine sort of environment. And roughly 3 months ago, after 3 months of being in quarantine, I had the pleasure of writing an article for Medium talking about reasons to be hopeful during a time like now. And I meant all those things, talked about wellness and the importance of taking care of yourself and good habits. And those things are all true. And I'll admit, in recent days and recent weeks, it's hard to feel as hopeful. But that's why sustainability is so important, because for all the things we talk about, it's so easy to get things going. It's very easy to be excited. It's very easy to get things moving. But sustainability is what keeps you going. So if you think about sustainability as a candle, for example, it's easy to get excited by the spark of protest, but sustainability is what happens next. It's easy to get excited about the spark of recruitment and getting in the door, but sustainability is progressing above that. So the question is going to be is, what do we want to do to be sustainable? Now, the beauty of this sort of environment here is we've had a number of different people talking about different approaches, and all of them are valid. There's no one way to solve this problem. And the problem is going to differ by organization. The problem is going to differ by area. We had some foolish remarks come out of someone's mouth. Well, that happens almost every day, depending on what you're listening to. But in this case, we had a CEO of an organization saying they couldn't find Black talent. And that's the silliest thing in the world. It's the silliest thing in the world. But that was his reality. That's a sad thing, but at least it came out of his mouth. So we at least know, for those people who aren't in this space, you can say, oh, this is real. There are people who still think that way. And I just was sending a message to my sister that when I hear something like that, I get I sometimes get more amused than angered, because for those who need to hear that, there are people who need to hear, sadly, need to hear someone say something that outrageous to know that this is still reality for so many of us. And until they hear something that absurd, which is not at all supported by data, they won't believe it. And many of us are tired all the time. That's natural. Microaggressions are real. And there's no one way around it. Some cases you just have to ignore. You know, there's certain things. I'm used to someone walking the other side. I'm 6'4", so I'm slightly taller than the average person. My mere presence will cause some people to back away. I can smile all I want. I can drop all my credentials and it won't matter. That's the reality. What's going to be important is what happens next. So if you think about the spark, sparks go away. I love candles. They smell great. But the spark goes away. If you want to have something continuous, you need to have something that is going to connect to. So as exciting as a spark can be, sustainability is what comes next. But you need to have both. For as much as I love this candle does nothing without a spark to get it going. So our protests are important. The protests are meaningful, but we're always going to think about what's next. So the recruitment's going to be important. The next thing is going to be what comes next. So what I would encourage everyone here, because if you're here, you're at least open. If you're not part of it, you at least want to learn. But the candle is not going to be this group, admittedly. The candle's not going to be us here in this room. It's not going to be us talking. It's going to be the people outside of this space who need to hear what we have going on. And I can give you suggestions, and I'm more than happy to do so, but what's going to be so important is just to start the conversation and accept begrudgingly that the solutions to these problems won't just happen immediately. National Urban League actually isn't the organization. NAACP is. We still existed for 110 years. 110 years. The problem has changed little by little by little. I can tell you, I'm not the first CFO. Not that I'm old, but I'm not old enough to be 110 years. My predecessor was in the game 20 years before the position came up. But that still means that 90 years before either of us, there was an organization. So the sad reality is, and it's not a sad reality, it's just the way it is that for so many of us, we just have to accept that we're part of the relay race. And one of my favorite races going back a few years would be 2012 Olympics, the ladies 100. They set a world record. But the reality is, even though the last runner carrying that baton was very excited, every single leg of that race was needed. Every single part of it is sustainable. If we want to set a record, if we want to make this thing go, we're going to have to all accept that our piece may very well be that even though we're holding the baton, we may not be the one that gets to cross the finish line. So what I would suggest we do in terms of sustainability is just keep moving. Just keep running. When we can't run any further, just pass on the baton. That's okay. And encourage them to keep going. Because ultimately the race is now going to be run. It may not be won by those of us holding the baton now. It may ultimately be held and run by those who hold it last. So when it comes to sustainability, just accept that it's a long race and just keep running. Thank you, Kelvin.
Thank you so much, Calvin. And we're going to keep running on our agenda here. And we have Dennis Carpenter, the CEO of Aspirational Insights Consulting. He's going to help us get from allies to co-conspirators.
In 1962, Malcolm X said, "The most disrespected person in America is the Black woman. The most unprotected person in America is the Black woman. The most neglected person in America is the Black woman." So I stand before you today, some 58 years later, not surprised, but saddened as it relates to the grand jury decision that came out of Louisville yesterday. And it's this sadness that hijacked my original comments and have caused them to take on a completely different direction over the course of the last 24 hours. As a Black man, as a husband, as a dad, as a leader, Breonna Taylor, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you chose to be a first responder, one of the most noble callings in our society. Yet when you needed justice, your needs were not responded to. I'm sorry. You were trained to save lives, oftentimes alongside law enforcement. Yet law enforcement put multiple bullets in your body and they watched you die. Breonna, I'm sorry that your ex-boyfriend was offered a plea deal that would have falsely labeled you as a member of an organized crime syndicate after your death. And I'm also sorry that white supremacy believed $12 million in hush money to your family would be enough to keep millions across the world, myself included, from saying your name and honoring you. Breonna, I'm sorry. I'm sorry your body was riddled with bullets on the night of March 13th, and the one cop charge was charged for those rounds that did not pierce your body. And on a more intimate note, Breonna, and one that might be apropos for today, I'm sorry that as a leader, I haven't been able to transition more racial equity allies into true co-conspirators. Because what your story should teach all of us is if we're going to sustain this movement to become a more just and a more equitable society, it's not enough for leaders and persons with power and privilege to be just allies. Folks, we have to graduate. We have to graduate and become true co-conspirators. And some might be wondering, Breonna, what's the difference? I'm glad they are asking. You see, allies make statements and profess their support for marginalized and historically oppressed groups when it's politically expedient to do so. But meanwhile, co-conspirators, we do the difficult work. We do the uncomfortable work of self-assessment, and we take quantifiable actions to improve the plight of said groups. And allies might call folks out in their circle or on various social media platforms when the risk is not too great. You see, allies take full advantage of the ability to opt in and opt out of this journey toward greater equity. And it's all based on the impact that taking a stand might have on them personally. But meanwhile, as co-conspirators, we show up. We show up again and again and again. And we do this because we know our collective humanity is interwoven into infinity. So as co-conspirators, we show up. We show up even when the fabric that holds us to a particular group or a particular organization might be unraveling right in front of us. We do it because we have an unapologetic commitment to fairness and a more just society. And finally, the actions of allies can oftentimes look and feel theatrical. And you all know we'd be lying if we wouldn't say we've seen it before. But meanwhile, Alicia Garza, activist and founder of the Black Lives Matter movement, she teaches us that co-conspirators, every time we get out and do the work, we interrogate our actions for any element of performance while rejecting any benefits of white supremacy that said actions might bring. As co-conspirators, we conduct this self-interrogation because we know it protects the purity of our actions. So as executives and as leaders, folks, this is our work. This is our work if we're going to do the irreversible, sustainable work of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our respective organizations. So let's continue to do all we can, while we can, so that one day, we'll be able to ensure that our personal and professional actions are accelerating that move toward a more just society. But in the meantime, Breonna, I'm sorry.
Dennis, I felt that. I really did. Deborah Langford is the Executive Director of Business Development for Advancing Black Pathways at JPMorgan Chase. Now, this is the first bank that stepped up with a program specifically to help African Americans. And, you know, other banks don't even know we have talent. So, Deborah, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Kelvin. Calvin, thank you for your analogy on keep running. And Dennis, I think we all need a moment of an inhale and exhale after what you said. This is about impact. And it is about us running, right? It's an inside-outside game. Clearly, one word, one syllable can sum up a lot of what we need to do, and that is vote. Right, I just want to share that. So thank you, everyone. I am super excited to be here representing JPMorgan Chase and see so many of my esteemed colleagues. I dare not start to do a roll call, Ken and Kimberly and a few others, because I think I'll get in trouble. But I see so many great leaders. It is a pleasure to be here with you for the inaugural DEI Executive Summit. And I've seen the chats going back and forth with really outstanding questions. I'm excited to talk about sustainability, but I'm also, Kelvin, in your introduction, to talk about firsts. Because when you want to talk about sustainability, you've got to be bold, you've got to be courageous, and you have to have a track record. Because I was listening earlier, it is not like a flame that burns out. It is not responding to an error, whether that is a comment or practices. We have a long tradition at Chase of being a partner and understanding both the inside and the outside game. I was super pleased to know that when the late, great Earl Graves had the idea for Black Enterprise magazine, there was only one bank that funded his vision, and that was Chase. As Butch Graves says, Earl Graves liked to spell bank one way, C-H-A-S-E. And I share that with you to say that we have a history of getting it right. And we have a history that we continue to have strategies around sustainability. It's going to take all of our commitment as a collective, everyone here, to create real change. And all of us gathering today is a crucial step. So, as I shared at JPMorgan Chase, we've committed to building a culture where integrity, fairness, and responsibility are central to how we engage with our employees, our customers, our clients, and our community partners. I joined in February to lead business development for Advancing Black Pathways, and I was thrilled because how many organizations have something that's specific, that deliberate, that actionable, that says Black, right? Advancing Black Pathways, right? Our key initiatives are to help us move the needle in creating sustainable change. And we're doing that through engagement and measurable actions. We've created an effort to hire and develop Black talent at all levels. That actually started with our Advancing Black Leaders program. Many of you know Valerie Rainford, who led that. And to improve the financial health of Black communities, our Advancing Black Pathways has 3 pathways, right? 1, careers, which of course aligns with all the great work of Advancing Black Leaders, which I'll talk more about. The other is education, and the other is wealth, right? The financial health and wealth of the Black community is critically important to us. We focused on these 3 areas because racial and economic disparities have created barriers to long-term success, the wealth creation, the educational achievement, and long-term career success. Our focus on careers and education is access to better education and training opportunities for Black students, increasing that access to well-paying career paths. Super excited that we made a stake in the ground. We talk about sustainability. You have to have identifiable commitments and say, here's how we're tracking. So one of our commitments was to hire 4,000 Black interns in 5 years. Even during COVID, we are tracking along to reach that goal. In fact, in 2019, we exceeded the number that would have reached us to get to this 4,000. as I mentioned, on Advancing Black Leaders Initiative. Since 2016, we've increased the number of Black managing directors by 41% and Black executives by 53%. Let's go back to Calvin's opening comment about a statement recently about lack of. Well, maybe it's because they're all here with us at JPMorgan Chase. Had to do it. So as I shared, not only have we done the 4,000 Black students by 2024, we've started an Advancing Black Apprentice program, a summer program designed specifically for Black rising sophomores and juniors to help them build early professional development skills and begin building their future paths to success. Since that inception, we've yielded 125 hires in Wilmington, Delaware, Plano, Texas, and Columbus, Ohio. This summer, we expanded our reach of students to New York and DC. I spoke to the group. They were outstanding to look at over 60 apprentices that were coming into the firm. And guess what? We had them work on a project for Black banks so that we got these students to come up with solutions for our Black bank partners because we want to support them as well. But we recognize that while talent is created equally, opportunity is not. And we're doing our part to change that in a sustainable way. I hope that many of you saw another one of our actionable commitments, the successful Show Me Your Walk HBCU edition, right? Where we partnered with the UNCF and Thurgood Marshall Fund to spotlight over 100 of the HBCUs and their graduates, 40 speakers, including the former president of the United States, Barack Obama. To celebrate that accomplishment, you have graduated. Your network, your family, and your tribe. We did not want that to go without being celebrated. And in fact, several of my friends who watched it said, Deb, I didn't even realize that, that it was a Chase-sponsored event. I saw certainly phenomenal leaders like our CEO, Jamie Dimon, who participated, and our CEO, Tasunda Brown Duckett, as part of it, but I didn't see it. You know why? Because it wasn't an oversell. We weren't putting up, hey, open up an account. Hey, do this, hey, do that. We did it because it was the right strategic thing that is sustainable, right? We wanted to recognize that. I think that's an example of an outside-inside experience. For anyone who's interested in more about what we're doing at Advancing Black Pathways, we have a website. It's www.jpmorganchase.com, and it's a /ABP. And you can find out about our entire program, what we're doing to support Black entrepreneurship. We just launched Advancing Black Entrepreneurs with Chase Business so that we can support the entrepreneur community as well. And so it's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. And Kelvin, I look forward to what's next.
Yes. Deborah, thank you so much. And thank JPMorgan Chase for taking action. You've heard our speakers on sustainability. We want to hear from you. There's hundreds of you out there. We want to get your insight. Click your phone camera to that link and let's hear your thoughts now. So as you're putting your thoughts in, what's going to be coming up next is going to be powerful because we're going to be having Carolynn Johnson, the CEO of DiversityInc, someone who helped inspire this very event from conversations with her. She's actually gonna put our friend Dave on the hot seat. Yeah. And we know Dave's a great guy. He's a CEO who wants to make change, but we're gonna put him on the hot seat for all CEOs and ask the questions that some people want to avoid. He's gonna answer those hard questions in 2 minutes. You ready, Dave? Still got a little bit more time to get your thoughts in there. I'm gonna just take a look at some of the top thoughts here. We have a thought at the top, vote. The next one, our allies must stand up at our organizations. And I would add, become co-conspirators too, yeah? I need to move from being an ally to a co-conspirator. Yes, yes, we do. All right. We're going to be sharing these comments, friends, with you. Again, you're going to get an email with all this insight, all this data is going to come right to your email box. So we're going to move to our next portion, and we're going to focus on irreversible and sustainable change. And I'm going to give up my host duties and pass it to the CEO of DiversityInc, Carolynn Johnson.
Thanks, Cal. And thanks to everyone who is on the line today. This is not an easy time for me as a 40-year-old, 4'10" Black woman. It's just not. And certainly not as a CEO who has to talk to white, male, privileged, sometimes tone-deaf CEOs about the fact that Black lives do matter. It's a lot. And so, again, as we think about yet again, another confirmation that not everybody believes Black Lives Matter, have some grace with us today. So Dave and I are CEOs of data companies. I view a lot of what is going on in the world as, I knew that because I don't view it from a place of emotion. I view it from understanding the numbers, right? And the commodity that is the most important right now that will move mountains and change things is trust. And so that's really the conversation that Dave and I are going to have today. We're going to talk about building trust because that's how you get seen, right? That's how things happen that are sometimes viewed as miracles. But before we do that, when we talk about co-conspirators and when we talk about allies, I think we have to acknowledge people who showed up as allies and they didn't even know we viewed them as such. And so it was amazing to see Deb Langford today because I remember seeing Deb for the first time when she was at Time Warner when I was, 25 years old. And she showed me that you could be authentic and still win as a woman of color. She had this beautiful hair. Her walk was that of here I come and look out world. And it was on one of those days where I was just like, wow, okay, I can do this as myself. Also thinking about Ken, the 17 years that I've been at DiversityInc, Ken has been there no matter when I have called. He has shown up, so I appreciate you for that. And it is awesome to go from being someone who views this person as just, dude, he dropped that knowledge. Forrest Harper, my mentor, now I'm on his board of directors. So while everybody on this call has touched me in some way, just wanted to point out those three individuals because you have certainly made a difference as an ally, even when you weren't trying to be. And so with that, for those of you who are not familiar with DiversityInc, we have, talking about trust, built up an amazing amount of trust with Fortune 500 organizations. To the degree that they give us more data around diversity and dimensions of diversity than even the United States government has at this point. And so I was going to use a cute and light example around how interesting, uncommon, trusting relationships are, but I don't think that's the time right now. The words of many of you on this call has told me that that's not the direction we need to go right now. And so I am the example of when people take the time to let down walls and assume good intent, that you can get to a place that you never even saw yourself. And so I think about an interview that I recently conducted with Arnie Sorensen, the CEO of Marriott International. On that day, what we had in common is that he was dealing with pancreatic cancer and that I was myself having some health challenges and I didn't know what was going to happen. And during that interview, Arnie talked about the fact that he was made CEO because people believed that he could do the job. There were some major gaps in experience, but people believed that he could do the job. And that is not the experience for a lot of Black people in this country, which is why to some we don't show up and we actually don't even exist in the talent pipeline. And so Dave and I are actively working right now on building that trusting relationship. I guess you could say I'm developing an ally in the tech space. And for anyone who will carry this message back, I want to talk about the fact that with data, there are plenty of Black people in the talent pipeline, specifically STEM talent, if we want to kind of dig a little deeper. And so there are some studies that have been done, but the American Science Foundation did a study looking between 2008 and 2018. And they focused on undergraduate degrees focused on STEM Black. And they found that there were 221 that went on to ultimately get a PhD, a STEM-focused PhD. And I'm sure you all can imagine that a majority of the schools, the top 10, were HBCUs. But I want to give you a story here about punching outside of your weight class, okay? Harvard, Stanford, MIT, Yale produced 220 in that period. And the endowment in 2018, the combined endowment of those schools was $111 billion. Howard University produced 221 during that period. And the endowment at Howard at that time was $750 million. So when we get attention, when we get resources, we show up and we show out. And so if there's ever an example of understanding that there is Black talent in the pipeline, there it is. And so with that, Dave, I want to bring you into this conversation because that's what it's all about, right? And I'm not going to grill Dave. This is a conversation. Kel, you are so dramatic. Okay. So, Dave, I want to start by just asking you, what has been your experience, right, with being an intentional, active ally and finding allies that you can trust?
I mean, I think I'm in the middle of the experience, to be honest. From those of you, before I say about, you're going to figure out that I'm from Canada. And I'm not only from Canada, I'm from a small town in Canada. And I was raised in a town in the north in the small Canada where pretty much everyone looked just like me. And I took to heart, as I was growing up in my household and the way I was raised by my parents were special education teachers, I took to heart that it's important as a human to provide opportunity for other humans. That's sort of how I was born. Fast forward, we created a platform, and a lot of people say they want to be able to create a platform to be able to provide a platform for change. In an interesting way, we literally created a platform. And it's real. I've been realizing that one way I can be an ally is literally taking this platform and trying to make it optimized for change. And my definition that really helped me understand it is taking on a struggle as my own. And I think I want to go to a bit of a heavy place, meaning what in our company, I'm really proud. We took on the gender gap because this is a challenge that I understood. I come from a matriarchal family. My mother is a powerhouse. My father passed away, but my mother's been in charge since I was born. And our company, we made sure we're one of the few tech companies that has 50% men and women in our company, including the senior level, excluding the board, and I'm working on it. Being an ally in the conversation of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think has taken on the struggle that many of you, and I hear you have been working on this struggle for 20 and 30 and 40 years. I'm just learning how to take on the struggle as my own, I guess is the way I'll articulate it. And I'm fearful to get it wrong, but I'm willing to do such a thing. That's what I sit in.
So, we've had many conversations where, I've got on my baseball cap, you've got on your baseball cap. We're comfortable, right? And during those conversations, you shared with me that your dad would say that you were a weird mix of a kid, right? With one foot on the ground and one foot in the sky at all times. What did that mean as a child, and how does that sentiment impact you now?
Yeah, I think bringing up my dad is probably the most impactful thing that happened to me as a human is his passing away. So when I think about my dad, who passed away quite a few years ago now, he said that of me, is that I sort of had this practicality, but I was always dreaming way above myself. But the foot on the ground was an important part of that message. And so I guess that means to me is that I like to think about some ideas like, what can we do to leverage our platform to actually have this conversation? And people say, that's a great dream. And then I go, let's do it. Like, what are we going to do? Let's start. And the foot on the ground is I feel this responsibility to not talk and wave my hands. I hate demonstrative leadership. I love that someone brought that up. And I know as a white Dave, 6'1", leading a tech company that leads to benefit from the outcome of, you know, I have an inclusion platform. I realized that I could easily be labeled the performative leader, and I need to actually go through that part and say, I don't know, how do I actually take the thing that I believe to be important, and then what are we going to do tomorrow when I wake up to actually take on this issue, knowing we're going to get it wrong. So I think that's, I talk too much, but that's what I hear when my dad always says, kind of dream, and then for God's sake, do something about it. That's what you're good at. Keep doing that. Don't do one or the other. Don't just keep your head down, but don't just keep your head up either.
Right. So now we're going to talk about privilege, right? The privilege that you carry. And so a lot of people go through life, and sometimes ignorance is a privilege for them. They don't have to think about being Black. They don't have to think about being a woman. And I just want to be very clear about something. We need to move beyond looking at gender as the diversity that matters. We have to focus more on that ethnic and gender diversity and other dimensions. But I focus there because a lot of times people say, you know, gender or. No, it's not an or, okay? And so that privilege, can you talk a little bit about, as you have been interacting with myself and Kel and Forrest and others, can you talk a little bit about greater understanding of your privilege and what that has meant to you?
Yeah, I mean, and this is probably one of the ones that hurts the most to actually talk about is, for me, I grew up in a pretty unique situation where my family actually raised me with special needs kids more than my own sisters and brothers. I was raised with special needs kids, and some of those kids were First Nations, and some of those kids were autistic. And I was sort of raised that these are my brothers and sisters. And people asked me, what's it like being raised like that? And my answer was, what's it like having hands? What's it like having, like, I don't know, this is how I was raised. I can't comment on how you were raised because I didn't experience it. However, that actually put something in my mind that was really hard to erase. And it was that the world is like this. The world is a table that everyone can get food from my mom, and that it doesn't matter if you're a First Nations disabled kid or you're a blood sibling, it doesn't matter. And what I had to unlearn is that this is the case for many, very many people at all in the world. And this is a very rare experience to actually grow up in a place like that. And so the reason I said this hurts is that, you know, we sort of really fought as a company to make sure we had gender equity. And then I shared this with you. And I mean, honestly, I was guilty of optimism. I was guilty of Barack Obama became president, and who's president next? Michelle, we're on this. I don't know. We got it solved. We got really genius, a lot of people working on it. I don't know if I need to work on it. I did the thing I know, which is putting, you know, lots of women in power in our organization. I'm good. Aren't we good? Aren't we moving forward? And I think part of my awakening is to go like, no, it's responsibility. There's not being okay. I was really awoken to figure out that there's either racist or anti-racist. That was a big aha for me. What am I doing to be an anti-racist? Because currently I was being racist. I was doing nothing. I was saying, of course, I would happily hire somebody who is a different race. I don't actively do anything about that. Because isn't somebody else taking care of that? I'm from BC, I'm from Canada. Isn't that someone else doing a great job there?
Right. Yeah, so I guess when we talk about racism, which is uncomfortable for a lot of people who are not immersed in it, I guess the initial feeling is to become defensive. Well, not me, you know, and when you take a step back and when you talk about an anti-racist, you know, Dr. Kendi's work around how to be an anti-racist, a lot of people don't realize that inaction is also racist, right? And so I think that's something that we really need to point out. And so thinking about the George Floyd murder, 8 minutes and 46 seconds. 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Police brutality, racism, social and health determinants. Do you have any perceptions that have changed since you have been really focused on and getting a different view of the Black experience, the poor experience?
Yeah. Yes, I have, and I think I learn it or unlearn more every day. I think that the biggest thing that happened for me personally was I mean, I would say, I'm sure there's racism. I'm sure it's such a thing. I started having conversations about it, and I guess and people call it being woke. I have conversations with peers who I won't name, but I have conversations with peers in the world that they just don't believe this is even a problem still. And for me, just having taken this on, and the day that George Floyd was murdered, the next day we sent out a thought exchange in our company and said, what are the sort of things that we need to do based on this, and have a conversation with all of our staff. And I wanted to hear from them. And there was passion in our company, and I was clear I was behind immediately. Everybody's been thinking this a lot more than me, and actually thinking, Dave, you got to do more about this. It's not okay that I work in this organization. Look at our masthead. I mean, look at it in a year, but look at it today. We are white folks. And not all of us, but if you squint, you see that. And so, yeah, I guess for me, it was education, it was action, and then it was diving deep in my soul and saying, what does it actually mean to be an anti-racist? What does it mean to hire a head of anti-racism and to put that out? What does it mean to talk to executive recruiters and say, we are hiring a diversity people into this role because we want that skill set, we want that perspective, and we won't move an inch. That all those are lessons every day that I'm dealing with to try to actually and now I'm seeing all the barriers. Now that I'm having conversations with people, I see it everywhere. Yeah. And it's like the I see dead people moment, right? It's everywhere around you. I was dead the whole time.
Mm. So as we're talking, I'm looking at the chat, and I've got a question for you, not something that we talked about before, but really one around, responsibility and power, who much is given, much is required. And so you said that, there are, some of your peers, you don't want to name names, right? But then we think earlier about creating co-conspirators. How do you interact with people after kind of really having an understanding of what's wrong, what has been done to not fix it? A lot of people say, that the police reform or the way in which policing is done is broken. No, it's not broken. It is working exactly the way it was intended to, right? And so now that you're, and I hate this phrase woke, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Now that you're woke, how do you go through your days interacting with people who act as if there is nothing wrong? For people not like them, like their worlds are just perfectly fine and it's their problem, they did it, let them sit in it for a while and let them fix it. How do you do that, or don't you?
Yeah, I think I do is important. I think it's important as a baton carrier in this. I think one thing I can offer is selling this wokeness to white people, and I realize that actually that there's ways of white fragility is a real thing, and it makes people blind and defensive. And when people go into their survival brain, they do not learn anything. And yet at the same time, this has to be a conversation that is brought up in a way that can open eyes. And that's not as simple as me confronting them when I hear that there's a bit of ignorance on their behalf, but then I take it to heart. And yeah, I think it's my responsibility. It's why I'm willing to stand in something like this and have a conversation so that I'm held accountable, so that when people see me, they say, yeah, Thoughtexchange, Dave as a human. When I wrote an article in Medium too, and it was about how I was raised in a diverse way, but I'm absolutely not a minority. And I believe that George Floyd's murder was actually not surprising at all. It was a predictable action that was systemically racist society designed to do that, and the way to get around it. People have been talking about this for a long time. So I feel a heavy responsibility as a CEO of a company around voice to say, if our platform's around people giving a voice, who can we give a voice to? Or not give a voice, you don't give people a voice. You remove the barrier for them to actually allow them their right to their voice to be heard by the people that need to hear it. People have a voice. And I actually really hate that patronizing statement that you give people a voice, because that's kind of bullshit.
Yeah. So whether we admit it or not, leaders have some level of fear and anxiety. So giving an example, you're in a conference room, the topic of what you watched on the news the night before comes up, and people are scared to lose their jobs. They have family commitments. And in that moment, you say how you feel, you're fired. Now you got a mortgage, car payment, tuition, college tuition. There's so many things that you promise people that you would do for them. And your job is a means in which to do that. And so fear and anxiety is a huge part of this, which is why sometimes you don't hear people's voices, right, as strongly as it may be coming out in their heads. And so as it relates to the success of Thoughtexchange, what causes you fear and anxiety? What are you scared of?
Yeah, and that's related to Karen's question in the chat. I'm afraid of getting it wrong and hurting people. I'm afraid of making it about me. I'm afraid that when I spend time talking about myself, I'm not listening to Dr. Carpenter talk about Ronald Taylor and the tragedy that happened and that with the decision. I'm afraid of making things about myself. So when I write about it and I take it on, I even had a letter that I wanted to send out to people that I got talked back for the right reason. But I mean, I remember in a town that had no African-American or Caribbean, Canadian, Afro-Canadian people, I remember knowing racist songs about Black people without ever having met one. I remember being scared of East Indian people because they would be dangerous to me, and this was not coming from my parents. I remember being raised racist and not knowing why. Yet when I think I should express that because it's important. At the same time, I don't want to make it about me. I'm afraid to actually say this is about, I want to empower the voice of people whose voice is critical in this. And is it my voice? I can't tell. Should I just get the hell out of the way? Shut up? Should I stand up and say something? I'm afraid to get it wrong.
Yeah, I'm afraid to get it wrong too. You know, day in, day out. You know, I think of everything that is riding on my shoulders. If I say the wrong thing in front of the wrong leader who employs 250,000 people in the US, are they going to view people like me differently? Am I ruining opportunities? And I don't even know those folks, never have mentioned their names. They may not even know who I am. So that's definitely one of my fears as well. The model Black woman, that's a lot of pressure. And I'm sure right now as a white man who is trying, model white dude, woke dude, that's probably a lot of pressure too. So kind of just sharing one of my fears. I don't want to leave you over there alone by yourself on that anxiety and fear, right? We got to do this together. But in the spirit of togetherness and doing this together, this is a heavy lift. This is not something that any one company, person, organization, college, university, or research organization can do. Like, we all have to do this together. And truth telling is a powerful thing as a starting point. So we got to keep telling the truth no matter how much it hurts, but the delivery must be on point. And it must hit people where they understand. I think the language we all understand is profitability. And so I think if we focus on what is to be gained or lost, I think that will kind of make the conversation a little easier to be had. And so I'm sure that there are some folks that are saying resources. I'm trying to learn. I need to know what to read, where to go. Some titles that you can read if you are not informed. So my grandmother used to say, if you're not ready, get ready. Okay. And so Full Dissonance, Notes from an Uneven Playing Field by Howard Bryant is one book. White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, the foreword by Michael Eric Dyson, that's my dude. How to Be an Anti-Racist by Dr. Kendi. Opportunity Denied, limiting Black women to devalued work. Those are just 4 titles that you can read. And on our website, right in the header, if you click on resources, there are about 13 or 14 books, and we're adding every day that you can read if you have some questions around language to use, facts to share when you're trying to help people understand what side of the fence they really should be on. And so I know that, Dave, I've been asking you a lot of questions. Do you have any questions for me?
I mean, I have a half hour for questions for you, but I think the one that I'd like to dig in with this group, right, is where we're heading up the end of this, is that when we were talking and you said you have a bunch of questions for me, I asked you a question, which was, are you okay with having this be about me? These are questions about me. And you said, Dave, you know what? A lot of this is about you. And I really took that to heart. And I just was curious if you could maybe unpack that for people in our last couple of minutes here.
Yeah, sure.
Just
So
how we didn't decide to wear the same outfit, but as the person who designed the conversation to put me here.
and that wasn't even planned. Like, we're just here, right?
For everyone that's talking right now, this was not planned. This is allyship on a different level.
So I think first, this whole concept of power, I don't think people really understand, live in, own, accept their power. And so a couple of things. If we're going to get to the right place, we have to understand that power cannot be taken. It must be transferred. It must be given. And if we're honest with ourselves, those doing a majority of the policy-making, decision-making are white men, right? And so this is about you, right? If I walk away with nothing more than this conversation today, every person on this phone, on this line that has to influence a white dude to do something differently, I hope they walk away with tools and best practices, a different frame of mind, a different lens in which to use when they're having those conversations, right? So it is about you, right? You know, you've got to get in somebody's mind and understand how they think in order to make real, irreversible, sustainable change. So that's the first thing. And then second, I think that sometimes when we're so stressed, I mean, we've been at home, we've been spending time with people that we thought we knew, and now we're learning who they really are because we're home with them all day. My 4-year-old and my 7-year-old are completely different beings today than they were in March, okay? And so we're under a lot of stress, and sometimes that comes out in not wanting to interact and engage with people when they really can help us get to a different place. And so this whole concept of power, I think we need to understand. But second, everybody has power. Every single person has power, no matter how powerless you may feel at times. Doesn't matter if you're a CEO, a coordinator, a college intern, you have power because you have influence. And so if in that moment, I am validating you and your commitment to people who are giving you a side eye, that's my power. I am validating that you are real and that you in fact really do mean what you're saying. And so that power is really important. And I think we have to remind people time and time and time again, because you get beat up with the news. You get beat up with that promotion you didn't get, or that raise you know you deserve, that project lead that you should have gotten, but it went to somebody else and you know why. And so that power is important, and we've got to own that. And sometimes you just need to hear somebody else say it. And as far as the theme, I have been talking about irreversible, sustainable change for a really long time, because I see what happens in the data when we figure out, talking about supplier diversity, that when you effectively manage it, it really does improve your bottom line, your relationships with the communities and other businesses. And so when we understand how that shows up in the data, we can then start talking about it in conversation. And that is why I am focused on irreversible, because to your point, we thought, some of us, that when Barack Obama became the president, that we were done. Close it out, everybody, you know, on to the next thing. And I think we clearly see now where, you know, people say things like diversity training is divisive. The president says that. And my initial thought was, you know what? Because I've got to listen to what's important and not who said it. There was some truth in what he said, because everybody shouldn't be a diversity trainer. And when it is done incorrectly, it is divisive. But we all have to listen to each other, no matter who we are, and take away from it the information that is helpful and leave the rest of it on the table. And so irreversible and sustainable change isn't going to be done if we don't do that. And so we've got to get together with the most unlikeliest of allies and get to work doing the work. And that was one of the main reasons why I accepted this invitation today. And so it was a great experience, and I'm appreciative of Kel reaching out, and then just how quickly everything came together. The team at Thoughtexchange, you all did an outstanding job, and DiversityInc knows about events, and this is not easy to pull off. And so you all did an amazing job. Dave, your honesty, vulnerability, and commitment to just get in there and do the work and punch it out is commendable. And I really do hope to see more of it from you and those like you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carolyn. And thanks so much. There's so many comments in the chat, and this is the sort of thing, it's hard to have people in a face-to-face. We could have this and we could go and maybe have a glass of wine or a Perrier afterwards and chat. And now we have to just go into our next meeting that we're all 3 minutes late for. Thank you, coronavirus. But yeah, I just want to acknowledge you. I want to acknowledge all the speakers. And I also just want to acknowledge Kel, who pulled this together for us. And what an amazing job to provide a platform for a conversation like this. So I'm so respectful and thankful that you did this. And I want to pass it over to you, sir, for the final words and the exchange that we're sending out to all the participants and all the people who registered for today.
We did it. We did it. We got a 2-day conference in 2 hours. Give or take a few minutes. We did it. And guess what? We're going to be emailing everyone all the insights from today. We're also going to send a final thought exchange to everyone on your thoughts on how we can make irreversible and sustainable change. We're going to send you an email with that and we're going to share the insights from that as well. There's a lot of amazing people at Thought Exchange. You got Amelia, Drew, Sonia, Rachel, amazing people. There's one guy, this guy, his humility exceeds his ability. His name is Jamie Smithers. He's a close friend of mine. He's the Chief Revenue Officer. You haven't even seen him pictured today. The guy, he's willing to do the work. He doesn't need the credit, but I want to give him a little bit. And if his team reaches out to you to talk about Thought Exchange, don't go Hollywood on them. Don't go Hollywood on them. But if you want to set up a call, and I'll even jump on the call with Jamie and you, and let's say you have 10,000 employees you want to get with, maybe 1,000 customers, maybe 500 prospects, or 10 board members. Let's go, Thought Exchange. But we thank you all. We thank all the speakers. We thank all the participants staying right to the end. And this is just the beginning. Let's build together irreversible and sustainable change. Let's go.